You were the third realtor we had actually had to call because the first two were
awful,
less than satisfactory.
The first guy that I went out with, we went to 3 different houses, and in that 2.5-hour period, he spent, I'd say 75% of it on his cell phone, parked on the side of the road, with me sitting in the front seat and not seeing houses, and it was just really frustrating. So we went to another lady who had no clue what she was doing, no clue whatsoever. Didn't understand our loan paperwork, didn't understand what kind of a house we were looking for.
Didn't want to take us to see houses.
Not fun.
Not fun.
We're about to go rent again.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty close to that factor.
We were at the point where we didn't think that the loan that we had was going to be satisfactory to find a house that we wanted in the time frame that we were looking at to get out of our apartment within our lease period. And then we found Renato through a friend of Adam's and took that referral and ran with it, and he was awesome. Took us to any house we wanted to go to, as many as we wanted to go to. Worked with us when we had misunderstood our loan paperwork and had to start all over on different houses.
You know, the other realtors that we dealt with, for starters, were very inconsistent. You could call them and they might call you back 2 days later, and they didn't want to go show houses when it was at all convenient for you. They wanted you to take off work. There was a lot of differences there in consistency, and I think that's a huge thing when you're trying to buy a house, is you need a realtor that's going to be there when you need them to be there. It's huge.
Renato's knowledge with all of the loan paperwork that we were dealing with, we had an FHA, and understanding how that was different from other loans. Knowledge just in terms of all the different ways that people breached contract on us and what our next steps were. The process from just start to finish. Nobody explained it to us before Renato, and it was such a different breath of fresh air for us in terms of new hope with finding a house.
We were new buyers. This is the first time we'd ever done it, and the 2 realtors we had dealt with previously didn't seem to understand that we had never done this before, and they just expected us to automatically know what to do and where to go and to look for houses ourselves and everything else. And when you're a first-time buyer, I should say, that's pretty hard.
But we didn't know what we were looking for, and Renato was able to take what standards we had, how many bedrooms, how much square footage, backyard for our dogs, and search for houses for us, and he surprised us with some really great houses. When we would get so down about stuff, when another thing would go wrong, Renato was always so positive and so uplifting and so take it to the next step, we'll be fine, let's work through it, and that was definitely wonderful.
No.
No, not at all.
You're going to spend half your day driving across town looking at houses. What's the difference? Mm-hmm. Especially when you get one you want to buy. Sure.
And the area, correct me if I'm wrong, we only went to Renato's office once. Other than that, Renato was very good about meeting us in places that was convenient. Halfway, could be at the first house that we were going to meet and look at, and move across town, because we looked everywhere from 470 right at the base of the mountains all the way to Aurora and south to Parker. So the distances that we traveled, it was really nice that not a word ever came out about how far it was going to be. When the sellers didn't show up to the final closing, after we'd gone rounds with them for several months, we sat there for 2.5 hours waiting for them to show up. Their realtor wouldn't answer the phone. They wouldn't call and let us know what was going on. And Renato took us out for coffee. We sat and waited. We talked. He kept working with us, telling us to keep the faith, how we had really come through some tough times and that we were going to make it through, that there was somebody on our side who was going to help us with all of that. And it became one of those things that we were at our final breaking point. That night when we left, they still hadn't shown up, and I cried like a baby, And Renato continued to push. He continued to call the realtor, continued to let them know that we would take things to a next level if they weren't willing to work with us. And through his positive attitude and hard work and pushing these people, they did show up and close, and we got the house. That was definitely the best moment and the worst moment.
It was the one thing that hadn't gone wrong yet that we never could have expected would go wrong, and it still went wrong, and then it went right.
Yes, very worth it.
Love the house.
Absolutely. We got a great house, good deal, and Renato really pushed to make it happen for us.
Would you do it again?
100%. Yeah. Definitely.
So we ended up in a bigger house than we expected. Pretty sure we'll stay here for a while because we won't outgrow it.
If we did outgrow it or something happened when you got transferred or something like that, we would absolutely use Renato to sell our house and hopefully pack him into another state if we had to find us a new one. I recommend him to anybody. Carries cards in my wallet, waiting for that chance to hand them out. So we would definitely use Renato for anything we needed, selling, buying, even just questions in the future. So, thank you.
It'll all be alright. I'll be home tonight. I'm coming back home.